It's often said that football is a working class sport, and in most of the world that is the case. From Bolton to Buenos Aires and Paris's banlieues, it tends to be council estates, favelas, and impoverished suburbs that produce the greatest players. Deprivation breeds desperation, and for working class kids throughout the world, football is viewed both as a joyous form of escapism from their everyday lives, and as a ticket out of poverty for them and their families, for the tiny number that manage to carve out careers in the sport. Diego Maradona, for example, grew up in a shanty town in Villa Fiorita, where he and his two brothers fell in love with football, all three going on to turn professional. El Diego, of course, did a little bit more than that. Raheem Sterling's father was shot dead on the streets of Kingston, Jamaica when he was only 2 years old, and he helped his mother clean toilets before school in the morning after moving to London at the age of 5. The likes of Luka Modric, Alphonso Davies, and Eduardo Camavinga were all brought up as refugees, Davies and Camavinga born in refugee camps, whilst Modric spent his early years learning to play football in the car park of a hotel housing asylum seekers fleeing from the Yugoslav wars. It is a bit of a recurring theme then, but I thought that it might be interesting to take a look at some of the extremely rare instances of players who buck that trend. Yes, footballers born into immeasurable comfort and wealth are the flavour of the day. Players raised in palaces, not poverty, castles rather than council estates, and one of them did actually grow up in a literal castle. I'm not kidding you. Before anyone says it, no, I am not denigrating these players for being born into wealthy families, nor am I celebrating them for it. It was, by definition, out of their control. I just thought that it might be quite interesting. I should add, I am not including the sons of very wealthy footballers like Romeo Beckham, for example, just because, well, I think that would be quite boring. Without further ado then, who absolutely was not born into wealth, here are 7 players who were already very wealthy before making it in football. 7th, Hugo Lloris. France's most capped male footballer of all time, having broken Lilian Thuram's record at the 2022 World Cup before retiring from international football, Hugo Lloris isn't your typical footballer in more ways than one. Born and raised in Nice on France's affluent Côte d'Azur into borderline aristocracy, Lloris is a Catalan name, and that's because Lloris's father Luc is of Catalan descent. Luc Lloris is a very highly paid banker and international law specialist based in Monte Carlo, making him very well equipped to act as Hugo's agent in his moves to both Lyon and Tottenham Hotspur. Meanwhile, his late mother, who sadly died in 2008, was a successful lawyer. Hugo obtained his baccalaureate in scientific studies while still playing for OGC Nice, with the club's permission, and in his early teens, he was one of France's most accomplished tennis players in his age group. Like his future Lyon teammate Johan Gourcuff, who was also an outstanding young tennis player, Lloris chose football at the age of 13, and it proved to be a wise decision. A World Cup winner, with 145 caps to his name, Lloris also now ranks 8th in Tottenham's all-time appearance charts, following more than a decade in North London. 6th, Andrea Pirlo. One of the greatest midfielders of his generation, and among the finest Italian footballers of all time, Andrea Pirlo played football with an almost unparalleled nonchalance and swagger. From his early days at Brescia operating in attacking midfield to his later years as a deep-lying playmaker, Pirlo strutted around the pitch, rarely breaking a sweat, dictating the rhythm and tempo of a game, and picking passes with pinpoint accuracy. Speaking about his relaxed attitude and approach to the game, Pirlo once commented, "I don't feel pressure. I don't give a toss about it. I spent the afternoon of Sunday, 9th of July 2006 in Berlin, sleeping and playing the PlayStation. In the evening, I went out and won the World Cup." End quote. Whereas those from more penniless backgrounds often put their success and drive down to the lack of alternative opportunities that they had growing up, it's possible that Pirlo's relaxed attitude, by direct contrast, came from the fact that he never had that kind of economic pressure lingering over him to succeed. Pirlo's father Luigi is a wealthy businessman who founded a successful metal manufacturing and trading company called ELG Steel in Brescia 2 years after Andrea was born. As a private company, not all of ELG Steel's finances are in the public domain, but the company manufactures iron and steel and is reported to rake in more than £60 million a year in sales. That is 8 or 9 times more than Pirlo is ever reported to have earned during his playing days, over the course of a truly glittering career in which he starred most notably for AC Milan and Juventus, as well as winning 116 caps for Italy and, just like Hugo Lloris, having won the World Cup. Pirlo reportedly has an ownership stake in his father's firm, though he has always refused to answer any questions relating to money, in addition to owning a vineyard which produces around 20,000 bottles of wine annually. Currently managing Fatih Karagümrük following his sacking at Juventus, it must be somewhat reassuring for Pirlo to know that, even if his career in management doesn't work out, he should have a pretty soft landing. Fifth, Oliver Bierhoff. A controversial figure within German football, Oliver Bierhoff scored a mightily impressive 37 goals from only 70 caps for Germany between 1996 and 2002, and he occupied a senior role within the DFB's national team setup from 2004 through to 2022, only relieved of his duties following Germany's second successive World Cup group stage exit. One of the game's last truly great target men, Bierhoff was strong, intelligent, and absolutely deadly in front of goal. Incredibly dominant in the air, and so precise in terms of directing those headers, few players have been more prolific with their heads in the entire history of the sport. Though Bierhoff became a world-class centre-forward for the likes of Udinese and AC Milan, financially at least, he had no real need to. His grandfather, Eduard Bierhoff, was a renowned administrative lawyer, and his father, Dr. Rolf Bierhoff, himself born into wealth and comfort, became an energy industry mogul following a short career in football. Rolf represented Germany at youth level as a goalkeeper, but he quit the sport at 29 due to injuries and to focus on his non-football career. An engineering graduate from the University of Karlsruhe, Rolf rose to become a board member at VSE AG, an energy company and subsidiary of E.ON based in Saarbrücken, before becoming an executive board member at RWE, the third largest company in Europe when it comes to renewable energy. Rolf sat on several boards and supervisory committees, acquiring a small fortune, and is said to have feared that the comfort Oliver was born into might thwart his work rate and application. Legend has it, growing up, that to combat that, Rolf would water the grass in the family's garden, wait for it to turn to ice, and then make Oliver practice diving headers on it. It is borderline sadistic if true, but Oliver did certainly develop a fine knack for scoring headed goals. Fourth, Al-Saadi Gaddafi. If that name sounds familiar, it's probably because of Muammar Gaddafi, or Colonel Gaddafi as some of you may know him by, or even Big Mo as he was known to friends and family, who was the de facto leader or dictator of Libya from 1969 through to 2011, and I am delighted to say that, yes, Al-Saadi was his relative. In fact, Al-Saadi is one of 10 of Gaddafi's children, 8 of them biological, and 2 adopted. The third eldest of Gaddafi's 10 children and 8 sons, Al-Saadi shared his father's passion for football. Gaddafi described football fans as being lethargic and foolish, and his guards once opened fire on supporters in a deadly riot, but he also played football in the garden with his children, attempted to buy Manchester United, and bought 6.4 million shares in Juventus when the club was first floated on the stock market in 2002 for a fee of €7.7 million, which accounted for more than 5% of the club's shares. As the son of a despot, the world really is your oyster, and Al-Saadi decided that football was his calling. Everything was handed to him on a plate. Stadium announcers would read out only his name and just the numbers for other players. Referees favoured his team, opponents were terrified of tackling him, and he was immediately installed as the captain of Libya's national team. When Al-Saadi signed for Serie A side Perugia in 2003, He hired Diego Maradona as his technical consultant and Ben Johnson as his own personal trainer. He didn't get any quicker or any better at football, but perhaps it is no wonder then that, after his first game, he failed a drugs test for a banned substance. Following 4 fairly embarrassing years in Italian football, owing purely to his father's wealth and status, during which time he played just 2 league games, Al-Saadi knocked football on the head to focus on his first love: sex, drugs, partying, and profligate affairs with both women and men. It's not known exactly how much wealth Muammar Gaddafi had at the time of his death. A reported $200 billion net worth would have made him the richest person on the planet and one of the richest people to have ever lived, though much of that wealth actually belonged to the Libyan state. Gaddafi just used it as his own personal piggy bank. Certainly, Gaddafi had access to billions of dollars, and Al-Saadi was famous for his lavish spending on parties, hotel rooms, and sex workers. During the Libyan civil war, in which his father was captured and assassinated in 2011, Al-Saadi commanded Libya's special forces, and he was later charged in 2014 but released in 2018. An Italian newspaper once said of Al-Saadi during his time in Serie A that, quote, "Even at twice his current speed, he would still be twice as slow itself." End quote. To all intents and purposes then, a terrible person and an even worse footballer. Third, Gianluca Vialli. The complete opposite of Al-Saadi Gaddafi, Gianluca Vialli was a brilliant footballer and a beloved character in both Italian and indeed English football, as was illustrated by the countless touching tributes that were paid to him after he died of cancer last month. There is one thing that Al-Saadi and Vialli had in common though, and that is that both grew up with money not exactly being a problem. The last of 5 children of the self-made millionaire Gianfranco Vialli, Gianluca grew up in a 60-room castle in Lombardy where he had plenty of grounds on which to play football. At the age of 16, Vialli put his education on hold to focus on football after he was signed by then third-tier Cremonese. Vialli broke into the Cremonese first team and spent 3 seasons starring for the club in Serie B, and a decade later he returned to Cremona to obtain his surveyor diploma as a private student. Vialli went on to have a truly stunning career within the game, starring for Sampdoria, joining Juventus for a world record-breaking fee in 1992, and earning several Ballon d'Or nominations. A joy to watch. Vialli went into coaching and business following his retirement at Chelsea, and he was so rich that he was even able to buy a house in London. He co-founded a sports investment company called Tifosi alongside a former Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs banker in 2017, and as recently as 2021, he worked alongside Roberto Mancini as the Italian national team's delegation chief as they won Euro 2020. Sadly, after beating the disease once, Vialli was re-diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in December 2021, and he died in January 2023 at the age of 58. Second, Michael Doughty. Born in Westminster, home of Britain's Parliament and Buckingham Palace, and by extension then some of the country's most notorious rogues, Michael Doughty was educated at Harrow School, which is one of the most expensive private schools in the United Kingdom. With fees of almost £50,000 a year, Harrow tends to alternate with Winchester College as the second most expensive independent school in Britain behind Eton. You need a decent wedge of cash to send your kids there then, and that is exactly what Michael Doughty's parents had. Doughty's father, Nigel Doughty, co-founded Doughty Hanson & Co., a private equity firm based in London, which has assets of €8 billion. Briefly an assistant treasurer to the Labour Party in 2010, and a member of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Nigel had an estimated net worth of £130 million, making him the 537th richest person in the United Kingdom at the time of his death. In 1999, Nigel spent £11 million of his fortune to rescue his club Nottingham Forest from administration, investing more than £100 million in the club over the next 13 years. In February 2012, Doughty was found dead in his own home gym, having suffered a heart attack at the age of 54. Michael Doughty never played for his father's club, only turning professional a couple of years before his death with Queen's Park Rangers in 2010. In a 10-year career, Doughty played predominantly in Leagues 1 and 2, most notably for his last club, Swindon Town. After leaving Swindon 2.5 years ago, at the age of 27, Doughty retired from football, citing personal reasons. Sometimes mocked by coaches and teammates for his posh accent and upbringing, Doughty maintained that motivation was never an issue, but surely money factored into his decision when choosing to retire, in a way that it probably wouldn't for most other players. First, Faik Balkya. Probably the most high-profile rich footballer, in terms of those who are rich for their exploits outside of the game or from unearned wealth. Most of you will probably have heard of Faik Balkya at some stage, without actually knowing a great deal about him. A member of the Brunei royal family, Balkya's father, Jeffrey Balkya, is a prince of Brunei, meanwhile his uncle, Hassan al-Balkya, is the country's sultan. Balkya's father was Brunei's finance minister from 1986 to 1997, in addition to presiding as the chairman of the Brunei Investment Agency, which is Brunei's sovereign wealth fund, for a number of years. Accused of embezzling $14.8 billion of government funds during the 1997 Asian financial crisis, Jeffrey handed over his personal holdings in 2000 to avoid any punishment. Renowned for his extravagant lifestyle, Jeffrey owns a private Boeing 747, some of the world's most expensive art, several hotels around the globe, and a mega yacht called Tits. The yacht's two tenders are named Nipple 1 and Nipple 2. Faik is one of 18 children Jeffrey has had with 5 different wives, and he has faced repeated accusations that he flew women out to Brunei to have sex with him, and even kept 25 women as his harems. He also holds the unique distinction of having had the world's most expensive legal battle with the state of Brunei. Faik has lived a considerably less controversial life than his father to date, unsurprisingly, aged 24, and he is currently employed by Thai football club Chonburi. Born in Los Angeles, Faik spent time in the much-esteemed Southampton, Chelsea, and Leicester City academies, but he only made 3 competitive appearances in European football, all coming for Maritimo's B team. Capped 6 times by Brunei, though he is uncapped since 2018, Faik has been described as the richest footballer in the world, with Britain's tabloids claiming that he has a $20 billion net worth. As is so often the case, Britain's media is at best misleading and, at worst, and indeed most likely, just outright lying. The entire Brunei royal family has an estimated $20 to $30 billion net worth, not one 24-year-old who is 23rd in line to the throne and is the son of a fairly controversial and disgraced prince. Of course, Faik will still be very, very, very wealthy, and his father certainly was, and still is, just to a slightly lesser extent, extremely rich. Hence why he tops this 7, but a $20 billion net worth is rather fanciful. That is it for today's 7. Honourable mentions go to the likes of Gerard Piqué, Robin van Persie, and Marcelo Bielsa. Thank you all very much as ever for watching. I hope that you enjoyed today's video. Hit the like button if that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And make sure that you are subscribed to HITC Sevens and have notifications turned on, but also to my backup channel, which should be on screen now. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.